There are already tons of videos on using Claude Code, but as someone who's been coding without AI for a really long time, in fact, I graduated all the way back in 2014, I thought it'd be an interesting perspective to see how Claude Code has completely changed my development workflow in just the last 12 months. And for those new to the channel, my name's Warren. I build apps solo and I'm sharing everything I learn about getting to your first 100 customers. Today, we're talking about my complete workflow for building high quality software fast with Claude Code. Now, I don't want to talk about all the things that have been mentioned in many other videos on this topic, so I just want to cover the things that have moved the needle the most for me. So in the last 12 months, I've gone from just using the cursor autocomplete feature to giving larger and larger features over to Claude Code just to complete on its own. And that's just due to the fact that as I'm using these models, my confidence in them is increasing more and more. But I do have one rule that I always stick to, which is if I don't understand something, I always learn it first and write it by hand. And if I do understand something, then that's okay to automate. I think this is the best balance to get the efficiency gains of using AI, yet staying in control of the code bases that you're working on. I believe that if you want to be a good software engineer, it's really, really important to understand every line of code that you're pushing to production. And if you approach using AI from like a vibe coding perspective, it's the quickest way to just turn your brain into mush, and it's not going to benefit you long term. So that means I review every single line of code that Claude Code produces. You might not agree with that approach, but it works well for me. And for anything that I don't understand, I will write it by hand and use Claude Code as like a learning partner to try and understand some more of the complex concepts. Claude is also fantastic at design, particularly when you already have a well-designed website and you want to add new sections to it. For example, I've just created a landing page for an SEO tool called SpectreSEO.com. And after designing the landing page, I wanted to add the FAQ section and the pricing section. So I just prompted Claude Code to add the pricing and FAQ section in line with the existing design. And just from a single prompt, it designed the pricing and FAQ section perfectly. I think when Claude has more context to work from, the output is far better. I find that when you ask Claude Code to design things purely from scratch, the results aren't very good. But when you already have the context of a pre-existing website and you're asking it just to add new sections, the results are amazing that way. And I think that's just because the more context that these models have, the better the results are, because you're leaving less things open to chance. And that doesn't mean necessarily you have to design the initial website. You could just copy templates from Framer or something from Dribble, for example. But the point is, if you have some kind of reference imagery or style guide, then giving it that context is the quickest way to getting the best results. That means using something like Tailwind UI or Chakra in my case, where you have a full typography system where text is appropriately sized. So you have text that's like small, medium, large, extra large, rather than just random pixel sizes. These design systems have these larger increments between spacing and text because a professional designer has already gone in and worked out what looks good together. So letting Claude work with these constraints in place means that you get far better results. Now, I just recently completely rewrote my portfolio website, and in doing so, I had 3 separate projects that I asked Claude Code to work between. One was the new portfolio itself. The second was the old portfolio website where all of the actual content existed. And the third was a recent project I worked on with all the latest libraries installed and set up in the way that I'd like things to work. Now, I was able to ask Claude Code to look at those 2 extra projects. So take the latest standards from the new project that I had and take all of the content from the old portfolio website and then merge that together and rebuild the new portfolio website. And the results of doing this were actually incredible. It took something that would have potentially taken me hours of work and did it in 20 minutes. So next time you're setting up a brand new project, you don't need to spend hours getting everything configured correctly. You can just point it to a previous project and have it repurpose that for your new idea. For more complex tasks as well, you can have Claude Code enter something called plan mode. And to do this, you just hit Shift Tab twice, I think it is. And this means that anytime you ask Claude Code a question, it's not just going to go off and change things in your repository. It's going to think about those changes and then produce a plan. You can then work together with Claude to make sure that plan is perfect before you finally execute on it. Now, I've used this recently to work on some really complicated features like a scheduling system for one of my recent apps. And the results from this have been so impressive, I feel like I'm going to be using this feature a lot more in the future. Now, one of the main benefits of AI is you can use it as sort of an exploration tool to try different things out in your code base before you settle on one idea. Now, normally this stuff would have taken a really long time because you'd have to handwrite all of the code. You get halfway down a path and then realize a certain solution maybe doesn't work. But with Claude, you can just automate all of these processes and then use Git to revert any of the changes that you're not happy with. Doing this means you can try loads of different paths out before you finally settle on a solution. The next point is to give Claude as much context as possible to leave way less ambiguity on the table. This means using MCP servers, so Claude has the most up-to-date reference with how to use certain tools or libraries, and then filling your Claude MD file with as much information as possible so Claude has a better chance of giving you the correct result first time. This also means telling Claude how to run things like unit tests, because what I like to do is have Claude Code make a change and then execute all of my unit tests. This is one of the biggest game changers for me for getting the output from Claude to be correct. It's when you have this iterative loop where it can make a change, run a test, make a change, run a test. If the test fails, it can see the output and then it can adjust accordingly. Now, the final thing that has moved the needle a lot for me is to use Claude Code as a code reviewer. Once you're done with the feature that you're working on, you can ask it to identify any obvious flaws in the code, look for security vulnerabilities, maybe look for things that could be made more dry, for example. And this can work just as well if you're working on your own or in a team. So before you send your code off for review by an actual human, have this sweep done so you're not wasting anyone's time. And if you don't have code reviewers because you're working on your own, this is a great way to get code review done so you can catch things that you might otherwise have missed. But those are all the things I'm doing to squeeze the most out of Claude Code to produce high quality software as fast as possible. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, check out this video here. Otherwise, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.